You step off the helicopter and the first thing that hits you isn't the size of the ship, it's the noise. A jet engine at full power somewhere behind you, a catapult firing every couple of minutes, and underneath all of it, a low mechanical hum that you'll realize weeks from now never actually stops. Nearly 5,000 people are about to seal themselves onto this nuclear-powered island for the next 7 to 9 months. No port, no weekend leave, nothing but open ocean in every direction. And the most dangerous 40 seconds of that entire deployment won't happen in combat. It'll happen on a flight deck the size of a few acres at night in a spot with giant yellow letters painted on the tower that just say, "Beware of jet blast." In February of 1991, a 21-year-old flight deck crewman named John Bridges found out exactly what those letters meant. We're going to get to the 90 seconds that nearly killed him because it's the real answer to the question people actually click on this video to find out. It's not whether the food is any good, it's whether a person can survive 5,000 strangers, 0 days off, and a job that has quietly killed more of its own people by accident than most branches lose to combat. Let's start with the part that sounds boring and isn't. Feeding this many people. A single carrier's galleys turn out somewhere around 17 to 20,000 meals a day, split into 4 seatings, so the flight deck crew coming off a night shift can eat what the Navy calls midrats, short for midnight rations, while everyone else is asleep. That's something like 1,600 pounds of meat, 350 pounds of lettuce, and 160 gallons of milk, cooked by a few hundred culinary specialists working shifts that never fully stop. The kitchen has to hit a set caloric target for every single person on board, somewhere around 2,850 calories a day for the men and 2,100 for the women, while still tracking allergies and religious diets across a crew the size of a small town. Get that math wrong for long enough on a 9-month deployment, and you don't have a morale problem anymore, you have a medical one. A supply ship pulls alongside every 7 to 10 days and swings hundreds of thousands of pounds of food across on cables while both ships are still moving at speed. Because there's no grocery store out here, no delivery truck, nobody to call when you run out of eggs. Whatever's already on board when the last resupply pulls away is what you're eating until the next one shows up. Run the math on a 9-month deployment and that's roughly 40 resupplies just to keep the lights on in the galley. But feeding you is the easy problem. Finding you somewhere to sleep is where it stops being funny. Picture a coffin standing on its side and now climb into it feet first, with about 3 feet of clearance above your face and a curtain instead of a door. That's a standard rack, and on a lot of ships, it isn't even yours, it's shared. The Navy calls it hot racking. 3 sailors, 1 bunk, split across 3 8-hour watches, so the mattress is still warm from the last body when you climb in. You're not sleeping because it's dark out, you're sleeping because the schedule says it's your turn, and that might mean 2 in the afternoon, with a jet engine running full power 40 feet above your head, and an 80,000-pound aircraft slamming into an arresting cable every 90 seconds or so. New sailors describe it as trying to sleep inside a subway car that never stops arriving. And here's the detail nobody warns you about beforehand. Below decks, there are no windows, none. Work in the engine spaces or the mess decks, and you can go a full stretch, weeks at a time, without ever seeing the sun rise or set. Sailors talk about losing track of the day of the week by the 2nd month. By the 4th, some stop trying to guess. You get used to the rack eventually. What takes longer is getting used to sharing everything else. The showers run on a strict schedule too, because a ship carrying 5,000 people only makes so much fresh water a day, distilled straight out of the ocean through machinery running around the clock, turning out something like 400,000 gallons on a good day and still barely keeping pace. On a busy underway stretch, a 2-minute shower is generous. And laundry gets returned however it gets returned, sorted by a stranger, folded by a machine. There's no stepping outside for 10 minutes to clear your head either, because outside is 4,000 miles of open water in every direction. And the only thing that changes about your entire day might be a single message from home, routed through a satellite connection the ship controls, not you. No corner store, no grocery run, no calling in sick when you're this far from land. That phrase follows you the whole deployment, whether it's food or water or a single hour of privacy. Whatever's already on this ship is what you get. Communication home isn't much better than the water pressure. For the first stretch of a deployment, before the ship settles into a rhythm, some sailors go days without a working line to anyone on land. When it does come back, it isn't a phone call, it's a short window on a shared terminal, a handful of emails, maybe a video call scheduled like a doctor's appointment, because bandwidth on a ship this size is rationed like everything else. Sailors miss birthdays. They miss the first steps of a kid they left as an infant. They find out about a death in the family from a 2-line message, sometimes hours after everyone else already knew. The ocean doesn't pause for any of it. The flight schedule runs the next morning, whether or not you slept. There's one more threat sitting underneath all of this that most people never think to ask about, and it's the one every sailor is trained to fear more than an enemy missile. Fire. A ship built almost entirely out of steel, sitting on top of millions of gallons of jet fuel and thousands of tons of ordnance, has nowhere to run if something goes wrong. You can't evacuate an aircraft carrier the way you'd evacuate a building. The nearest land might be a week away. So every sailor, no matter their actual job, trains constantly for general quarters. The alarm that sends the entire crew sprinting to sealed stations, dogging hatches shut behind them, because a fire below decks has to be fought from the inside by the same few thousand people who are also trying to live there. The USS Forrestal fire in 1967 killed 134 sailors in a matter of hours after a single rocket accidentally fired across the flight deck. And that disaster is why every new sailor still runs through the same firefighting drills today, decades later, in full gear, in compartments heated to feel like the real thing. It's rehearsed so often, it becomes background noise, right up until the one day it isn't. Now for the part that's actually the most dangerous, and where John Bridges comes back in. Bridges was a flight deck crewman aboard the USS Eisenhower, hooking an A-6 Intruder up to the catapult for a night launch during the opening days of the Gulf War. The jet's engines were already spun up to full throttle, because that's how a carrier launch works. The aircraft goes to maximum power before it's ever released, which means there's a wall of thrust screaming a few feet from anyone standing nearby. Bridges finished his check, turned to walk clear, and instead walked straight into the intake. In under a second, the engine had him. The suction tore his helmet, his goggles, and his flotation vest off his body and fed them into the turbine first. And by most accounts, that's the only reason he's alive to tell it. Those blades were spinning somewhere in the thousands of rotations per minute, and the wreckage from his own gear jammed the engine and forced the pilot to cut power before it reached him completely. He was wedged inside that intake, alive, for almost 3 full minutes before the crew managed to pull him back out, his hands and arms cut open from bracing against the metal the whole time, trying to hold himself in place instead of letting the suction pull him any deeper. When they finally got him free, his hearing was gone for days. Everything else, somehow, still worked. That's not one bad night. That's the job description. From the late 1940s through the late 1980s, by the Navy's own safety accounting, thousands of sailors and Marines died in and around carrier flight operations, a toll that dwarfs what an equivalent stretch on an Air Force runway ever produced. Jet intakes, spinning propellers, an aircraft catching an arresting wire wrong and swinging sideways into a crowd of deck crew. That's why everyone walking that flight deck, on every carrier in the fleet, wears a color-coded jersey that tells the rest of the crew exactly what they are and exactly where they're supposed to be standing. Yellow shirts direct the aircraft. Purple shirts, the ones everyone calls grapes, run the fuel lines. Miss your lane by a few feet in the dark, and the enemy isn't what ends your night. Here's the part that actually gets to people more than the flight deck does, though. Ask sailors who've done multiple deployments what the hardest part really was, and most of them don't say the catapults. They say the sameness. 7 months, sometimes 9, and every single day looks exactly like the one before it. Same grey steel, same recycled air, same faces at the same mess deck tables, running the same drills, hearing the same announcements over the same speakers. There's no corner store, no grocery run, no walking away from any of it. And that grind is what quietly wears people down more than any one dangerous shift ever could. And yet, the culture on board doesn't collapse into misery. It leans the other way. Cooks bake a birthday cake for a sailor who has no idea what today's date is anymore. The mess deck runs taco night every single Tuesday without fail, because a small, stupid ritual is sometimes the only thing keeping a person tethered to the calendar at all. There's a barbershop that cuts something like 1,500 heads a week, a post office, a small store, even a brig, because you can't exactly march someone off the ship to a county jail in the middle of the Arabian Sea. It runs like a floating city, right down to its own police force and its own zip code. No corner store, no grocery run, just a city that built its own instead. On a good night, the hangar bay turns into a movie theater, folding chairs lined up in rows under aircraft with their wings still folded, a projector throwing something loud and dumb up onto a makeshift screen, while the ship rolls just enough that you feel it in your stomach. There's a gym crammed between pipes and cable runs, where sailors trade off machines on a schedule, same as the racks. There's a chapel that runs services for whoever wants one, whenever the flight schedule allows it. None of it changes the fact that you're still 4,000 miles from anywhere that isn't this ship. But it's the difference between a deployment people survive and one that actually breaks them. And every sailor who's done more than one of these will tell you the small stuff is the whole reason the big stuff doesn't win. Strip away the taco nights and the birthday cakes, though, and the honest version of this job is a workplace where the 4 real threats aren't enemy fire at all. They're exhaustion, isolation, a coffin-sized rack that's never fully yours, and 40 feet of open deck where one wrong step ends a career or a life. John Bridges survived his 90 seconds because a piece of his own gear happened to jam the right part of the engine at the right instant. Most sailors never get that close to the edge. But every single one of them signs a contract knowing the edge is there every single day for the length of an entire deployment, with no door to walk out of and, as every one of them will tell you, no calling in sick. So the honest answer to how they actually survive it isn't some secret the Navy is hiding. It's smaller than that, and stranger. It's a rack that's still warm from the last person who climbed out of it. It's coffee that tastes like the inside of a metal can and somehow still carries a sleep-deprived deck crew through a 16-hour shift. It's 4,000 strangers deciding, one watch at a time, that the person standing next to them on that deck is worth watching out for, because out here, that's the only safety net anyone actually has. That's not a system the Navy built on paper. It's just what happens when you take 5,000 people, strip away every convenience they've ever known, and give them nowhere to go but forward, together. John Bridges went back to work on that same flight deck after he recovered. Most sailors who come that close to the edge do. Not because the danger stops mattering, but because by then the deployment isn't over. The schedule doesn't pause, and the only way out of a 9-month contract with the ocean is straight through the middle of it. That's the part civilians tend to miss when they hear a story like his. Nobody on board treats it as a miracle. It gets filed away as a lesson, briefed to the next class of flight deck crew, and everyone goes back out the next morning anyway, because the launch schedule is already posted and somebody still has to hook up the next jet. And maybe that's the real question worth sitting with once the ship finally pulls back into port. Was whatever they got out of it, the training, the paycheck, the story they'll tell for the rest of their life, worth 9 months in Iraq that was never really theirs?